Okay, so my name's Wolfgang and I'm going to present a little video that is not specific to Astroberry but useful for all kinds of Raspberry Pi users. And it is about how to back up the relevant part of your SD card, how to change its size and how to manage the size of your SD card actually. Have fun. I will show you how to use the GNU partition editor on Linux operating systems such as Ubuntu or Raspbian. The program is called Gparted. You have to start it with super user privileges, and it lists all available hard disks, which are usually labeled with something like def SDA, def SDB. You can identify the SD card of a Raspberry Pi by looking at the name of the partitions, which are usually boot and rootfs for root file system. As you can see here, there is a large part of this 16 GB SD card that is not used. First of all, I have to unmount these two partitions by clicking on the key icon. Then I can select the active partition and by clicking on this third symbol in this upper icon list, I get a dialog that allows me to shrink or to expand the allocated space available on the SD card. So by now I have expanded this, and you have to carry out this operation by checking out the little green tick mark. Now I've expanded the size of the SD card. That is something that is being automatically done when you mount a new disk image. However, you can also shrink the size of a partition, and that is especially useful if you have made modifications to your system, to your Astroberry system, for instance by installing additional software, and you want to back up this. Imagine you have a 128 GB SD card, then you don't want to back up all these 128 GB, you just want to back up the relevant part. So now I'm shrinking the size to less than 7 GB, and I'm leaving only the relevant part of the system available. Next thing is to make a binary image of this relevant part of the SD card. For this purpose, I'm opening up a terminal and I use the command double disk, which is called dd. Sudo dd and the definition of an input file, which is, for instance, def SDF for this particular card, and an output file, which is the location of the image that is to be stored, are given as parameters. The next parameter is the block size, which is defined as 1 MB here. And the next parameter called count takes care that only the first 7,000 megabytes are being copied into the disk image. The final parameter, status equals process, allows to see the progress of this copying process. By doing so, you get an exact binary copy of your SD card or a part of it. This process takes a few minutes, and once it is done, you will see that we have now made a file of approximately 7 GB size. It's a little bit bigger due to the sectors used. And this is the disk image, which is only 7 GB out of the 16 GB available on that SD card. Next thing is I'm gonna copy that one back onto an 8 GB SD card. So I've shrunken the SD card actually. And this is done by switching the name of the input file and the output file, removing the count parameter, and running double disk again, which also takes a few minutes, and I've shortened that process a little bit. So by now we're waiting. And once this is done, we see here an 8 GB SD card that is holding the relevant partition from the 16 GB SD card. In order to give you a proof that this really works, I'm now booting from this 8 GB SD card. I'm using a Raspberry Pi 400 that is basically a Raspberry Pi 4 with a keyboard. Here's the 8 GB SD card. Turning on the power. And I'm turning on the monitor. So let us take a look at the monitor and wait a little bit until the SD card boots. Of course, I also have to select the proper channel for the HDMI output of the Raspberry. Boot messages are suppressed in this case, so I'm directly booting into the desktop. And now I'll show you how to use the GNU partition editor on the Raspberry Pi directly. So as said before, you don't need a Linux system. You can also do this on your Raspberry Pi. You just have to install Gparted. Takes a little while to locate the appropriate package. And once you have done the installation of the partition editor, also with super user privileges, you can leave the installing suite, go to the system tools. There you are. Take care never to manipulate the system disk of your Raspberry Pi or computer with Gparted. This can lead to total chaos and anarchy. But as you can see again, we have the same tool available. We can increase the size of the partition, or we can add a second partition, for instance, a partition that is meant to store imaging data on the Astroberry or something else. This appears as a second SD card afterwards.